So in this video, we're going to discuss congruence and triangles. And we have to be very careful when we discuss congruent triangles because the order that we describe the congruence is very important. So congruence, we know that that means same size, same shape. And notice that these are both triangles and they're the exact same size, so they're congruent triangles. Now, the corresponding sides and angles, that just means that if I were to slide this triangle on top of the other one, I could see which angles and sides match up. So you can see that angle A matches up with angle D, angle B matches up with angle E, and C matches up with F. And likewise, the sides do as well. So side AC matches up with side DF. So those are what we call corresponding angles and corresponding sides of a triangle. So in this problem, we are given that these triangles are congruent. They tell us that they are. And notice that they gave us a specific order. So JKL is congruent to RST. Since J and R are the first letters in each triangle statement, then those are the angles that are congruent to each other. Notice that J and R are both blue. And then K and S are both in the middle, and so those are going to be congruent to each other. Notice that they are also both the right angles in their triangle. And then L and T are both congruent because those are the last letters listed. So those are congruent to each other. When they say list all of the corresponding congruent parts, that means that we have to list both the angles and the sides that are congruent in the triangle. So we just talked about all of the angles that are congruent, and this is all you have to say to list that. So angle J is congruent to angle R, and so on. Now the sides, just make sure that when you list a side, you're using two letters, and that you use the segment bar above them. So for example, if I'm doing JK, then it's going to be congruent to RS. Notice that I did not list this as SR. I need to make sure that if I do J first, that I do R first over here. And also notice that I have the segment bar above them. So let's do the other two sides. KL, so notice this is going to go from this angle to that angle. So KL is this side, and so I have to list this side as ST. So KL is congruent to ST. And then JL, that's the long side, the hypotenuse, that is congruent to RT. So now let's go backwards. Now we're going to be given two triangles that are marked congruent. And we have to identify all those corresponding parts again, and then we're going to write the congruent statement. So notice that we're going to pick which angles and sides are congruent based on how they're marked. So for example, angle A is corresponding to angle F because they both have 3 arcs on them. Angle B is congruent to angle D because they have a single arc on each of them. And then angle C is congruent to angle E because both have a double arc on them. And then if I do the sides, notice that AB has that double marking on it. So that means that that's congruent to this side over here that has the double mark. So AB is congruent to FD. And then I have AC, that's this long side over here with the 3 marks on it. That's going to be congruent to FE. And then our last side is BC, that's the bottom side, with a single tick mark. That's going to correspond to DE. And you can see how I use the segment bar over all of those in the congruent statement. So if I want to say this triangle ABC is congruent to this triangle, I need to be careful on how I list those letters. So if I'm going to say ABC, then I need to say that's congruent to triangle FDE. It has to go in that order. It would not be correct to say it in as ABC is congruent to DFE or anything like that. So how we use that? Well, if I have two congruent triangles and I know information about one triangle, then I can use that corresponding side to figure out the information on the other triangle. So for example, I know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So AC, again, if I look at the congruent statement, that's the first and last letters. That's going to be congruent to the first and last letters here, so D and F, so side DF. So DF is the same size as AC. So if it's asking me about the length of DF, I know that that's 3. Likewise, angle B is going to be congruent to angle E because angle B, that's the middle letter, that's going to be congruent to the angle, the middle letter here. So they marked angle E as 28 degrees. That means B is also 28 degrees. So again, let's test you out, see if you know which statement is correct. So take some time and see if you can figure out which one of these, A, B, or C, is the correct triangle statements. So again, we have to decide. All of these go in the order of J, K, L. So I'm going from a double arc to a single arc to a triple arc. So I have to make sure that in this triangle I'm going in that same order. So this would be triangle N has the double arc, M has the single arc, and P has the triple arc. So I would choose B, this one right here. Because that's the one that goes in that same order. So be careful when you're doing your congruent statements, and we'll be using that later in proofs.